So, AGOA turns 15. What exactly has it done for the African economies that are eligible to take part in it over the last decade and a half? Let's find out. Luqman Ahmad is a private sector development director at Adam Smith International. He's live in London right now for more analysis on AGOA. Mr. Ahmad, thank you for your time this evening. Year on year, total trade volumes between the US and sub-Saharan Africa was down 18% in 2014. Based on the data you've seen so far for the year to date, how does trade in 2015 compare to the same period last year?
Firstly, thank you for having me. We have seen significant actual decrease from 14 to 15, I think over 25%, looking back at the first half of 14, comparing it to 15. So we have seen further decline, from 13 to 14, and again declining again in 15.
Indeed. Across the board, however, oil...
I should also note...
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that although there has been decline, there have been a few countries that have done really well: Ethiopia, Uganda, Rwanda. So there are some countries that have really increased their trade and exports to the U.S. So I think there's some glimmer of hope for a number of countries. Obviously, Angola and Nigeria have suffered the most.
Indeed. Across the board, though, oil, non-oil goods, we're seeing this general decline, especially in 2014 data. What are the specific factors that are driving the decline, especially of non-oil imports to the U.S.?
I think your reporter mentioned it, and I think the competitiveness of African products, the prices of their goods, the quality of their goods. I think there's increased increased competitiveness between countries, between continents. So I think competitiveness of goods. I think many African countries, and in fact we work in a number in the agriculture sector. I think they struggle to bring yields up, to increase productivity and quality. I think that has a significant effect in terms of light manufactured goods. I think price is really a key challenge for them to overcome the price of goods that come out of the Far East.
Indeed. AGOA's coverage, of course, covers fairly little, if any, as far as agricultural goods are concerned. But let's assume, for the sake of argument, that if AGOA did cover 300+ tariff lines of agriculture, what opportunities would be there for exports of agricultural commodities to the U.S. from Africa?
I think there would be significant, grains. I think there are significant opportunities to improve productivity in basic goods like maize and rice. I think those are the two. Cotton is obviously another in East Africa, which is important. I think the competitiveness of smallhold farmers, possibly more investment in commercial farming. We work in a number of countries in Kenya and the DRC, and in Nigeria as well as West Africa, and we are seeing moves towards increased competitiveness and increased productivity. If African countries can achieve those increased yields at the farm level, then I think they can compete and be more effective at accessing the U.S. Having said that, the U.S. agriculture market is fairly protected. You'll still have standards issues which will become a non-trade barrier, non-tariff barrier to trade into the U.S. So I think there's still some regulatory hurdles for African countries to access the U.S. market.
Let's talk about the Export-Import Bank. Its mandate, of course, has lapsed. To what extent has that affected trade volumes between the U.S. and AGOA-eligible states?
Well, I think last year there were $38 billion worth of exports to African countries, and those were financed or underwritten or insured by the Exim Bank. Of the 38 billion, 1 billion was secured by Exim Bank. So if the Exim Bank is no longer going to be able to play that role, then I think you can see a further possibly 3 to 5% effect on the market. So it won't have an overwhelming effect, but there clearly 3 to 5% of trade has been supported by the Exim Bank.
Indeed. We'll have to leave it there for the time being. But as always, thank you very much for your time, Mr. Luqman Ahmad. He, of course, is a private sector development director at Adam Smith International.